Hi, welcome to Module 2.2, Design Phase. As always, we'd like to thank Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation for their support of this course through the project Community-Led Design for Specialized Housing in the North. We'd also like to acknowledge the partnership that makes this certificate possible between Nishnawbe Aski Nation, Together Design Lab at Toronto Metropolitan University, WASA Distance Education Centre, and the Faculty of Community Services at Toronto Metropolitan University. So, what are we going to learn about design? By the end of this module, you should be able to understand what design is and what your role is as the project manager in understanding design and the design products, how the values of your project laid out through the scoping statement and other documents can be transferred into design, what the relationship is between design and the construction process, and how you should be cautious about cost-saving measures and decisions made during the design phase. This module, like many others in the course, is not about making you an expert in design or an architect, but helping you to fulfill the role of project manager as it relates to design. Here, the role is really about ensuring that the design selected meets the needs and objectives of the project. So if you think back to the scoping statement module, you'll remember that a housing project should be tailored to a specific housing need in your community. And related to that is going to be choosing a design that meets the specific challenges or specific needs or priorities or preferences of the future potential occupant population. And so that's going to involve matching a selected design to what you've heard through your engagement, to what you've built into your scoping statement as those needs. There's a thing we need to know, or a note we need to make here about time and sequencing. When we get to the cost control model coming up, you'll see how with cost control, and if that were the only value that we were considering, it would be best to have totally designed the building before we start doing any ordering or construction or site prep, because before any of those things take place is when you have the most control over cost. And so through design, when you're trying to control cost, it's easiest to make changes and create savings before anything has started. However, in many cases, cost control isn't the only thing at play. For a number of reasons, you can think about supply chain as the easiest example, and the need to get certain items either up on a winter road or ordered because of long lead times. There will be reasons why you have to move forward with a partial or incomplete design where certain details or site-specific adaptations or finishes haven't been decided yet. And this isn't wrong. It's about finding the right balance for you and your project and the risk that you can tolerate, and understanding that not every decision, and we'll certainly talk about this more as we talk about scheduling throughout the course, not every decision can happen kind of one after the other with things being totally complete. And instead, often decisions in housing, and design is one of these examples, might be incomplete when the next activity has to start to be able to ensure that you remain on time. And then also, before we get into the specifics of design, I do want to talk about cost savings just for a second. It can be really common at this time in the design phase to try to value engineer. And so it might be that you've selected a kind of design template, or you know what direction you're going with design, and you're working with the architect or designer or supplier to fine-tune that design and make it kind of specific to your project. And there can be a real incentive or need, even depending on your budget, to value engineer at this stage. That means to try to find cost savings by removing some things or making some changes. Now, This isn't wrong, and as I said, it's sometimes absolutely necessary. But the caution I want to give here is against just removing things on paper that, when we're looking at a drawing, don't seem necessary, but that you may regret down the road once your building isn't on paper but is actually built in your community. And that could be because either they were really important to the population that you were serving and now they've been removed, and so the project doesn't totally meet the need. But also, and kind of more commonly, and what I want to suggest here is that there are some kinds of savings that save you money in the building process, but that end up bringing long-term costs to your project. So it can be things like energy costs going up in the long term because you reduced some insulation, or you went with a lower grade window, or other things that can make the operation of the building more expensive in the long term. Or it can be things where you opted for a lower quality product at this phase that means that it breaks down earlier. It has a shorter life cycle and adds to the maintenance costs of the building. And so while value engineering is an important part of the design phase, try to be cautious and really work with experts. It might be your tribal council representative. It might be other people on the building project team. It might also be reflecting on what's been done in your community before to make sure that what you're value engineering is actually bringing you value. Well, let's get into the actual design. And there's no magic solution to design, and I'm not going to be able to say in this module, if you pick this design here, it's going to solve all of the problems in your community. There isn't a kind of one-size-fits-all solution like that. And instead, what we're hoping to do in this module is give you some tools to be able to match a design to your particular project, and to give you tools when you're reviewing designs to know how to make the best match possible. And really what we're talking about in this is a kind of product, architectural designs or construction drawings. There's different names for this final product, and choosing the one that best matches the objectives of your project, as I said earlier. And there's kind of two different critical elements, and they're related, that we're going to discuss in this module. And both of them have to align with your scoping statement. The first is the kind of technical components of the home. That's the assemblies of the home, how it's built, what kind of value you're getting out of that, and whether it meets the goals. And so you'll remember back to our scoping statements where, for example, there were some that were really targeted around using local labor and local materials. And so you'll want to ensure that the assemblies reflect those values if those are something you're putting forward in your scoping statement. Whereas other scoping statements may have been focused on quick assembly. And so again, here I might be pointing to a difference between a kind of stick frame assembly, something built entirely on site using local labor, versus something that's maybe modular or panelized that prioritizes time efficiency. Again, there's no right or wrong there, but you're going to want to make sure in the project that you're reviewing that the assemblies match the goals of your scoping statement. It can also be things that we saw in the scoping statement like mold resistant or fire resistant, or insulative, more insulative than usual, or uses passive energy. Those are all things that you would want to look for in the assemblies, as well as in the second technical component, which is the specification, which is going to be the kind of master technical document. And we'll get into how to read that and where to find it in just a second. The other component that you want to make sure aligns in design is a social component. It's the floor plan, the layout of the house, the features of the home, and making sure that those align with the needs of the population that this project is targeting, so the future occupant. And both of those, the technical components and the social components, are going to need to be decided upon in this phase, and you have to make sure that both of them match. So when you're reviewing a potential design, what you're looking at is an architectural plan, and you want to make sure when you're having a good flip through that set that you understand what you're looking at. And the first question you have to ask yourself, and this is a learning that we have had as the project team through our work in the North over the last decade, you want to make sure when you're having a flip through that there's enough information for you in what you're looking at. Too often we've heard from communities that they're being asked to choose a design based off of a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 page document. That's not long enough. That doesn't have all of the detail that you need to review to be able to make an informed decision about whether this design is right for you. You're missing critical elements. And some of those key elements that you want to look for are, of course, floor plans that show the layout of the home, but also things like elevations. You want to see the building from the outside, understand the window placement, understand the kind of massing, the shape, the roof structure of the building. You, of course, want to have a detailed architectural specification. So the specification is a kind of written forward to the document, often comes before most of the drawings, and it outlines in detail the products that are going to be used to build the house. And you want to make sure that you can review to make sure that those products match what you know you need in your community to guarantee things like durability and appropriateness for climate. And so that's things like what types of windows are being used, what type of lumber is being used in different moments, as well as things like the mechanical systems, the electrical systems. And while you don't need to be expert in each of those, and you may want to consult with someone who is more expert at this stage to have an understanding of what the minimum requirements in a specification are for your community, for your geography, for your climate. And as well, as we'll say kind of throughout this course, one of the best ways to learn here is to rely on your network and to build an understanding for yourself of what those minimums are and what you're going to look for. And then as well, the other component that's listed here is making sure that there are details about how the heating, cooling, electrical, mechanical systems all work within the building. What you see on your screen is a cover page, and usually the cover page in a construction drawing set or an architectural drawing set acts as a kind of table of contents, and it works you through everything that you're going to find in that set. And the one that you see on screen here was created from the same project that is supporting this course, Community-Led Design for Specialized Housing in the North, and it's one of the family housing sets. And what you can see along this area over here is all of the different drawings that are included. And the other thing to note there is that this package includes also a structural, mechanical, and electrical package. Now, sometimes in a housing set, those can all be combined and won't be called out separately, but you do want to make sure that those details are there. And you can see just looking at this cover page that you have more than just those 3 or 4 pages of detail. And what you have here is a kind of full list of the things that you should be looking for when you're making a decision about whether a design is right for you. So I'm going to go back to the 2 key elements to review. And I've spoken a little bit about the specification already and making sure that the products being outlined and the systems being outlined match the requirements that you have for your project, for your community. But I want to talk a little bit now about floor plans, and we're going to spend the next few slides thinking about how the social arrangement of the home should match with the project that you're undertaking. And so this is less of a technical review. As I say, with specifications, it's about making sure that the products meet the minimum standards or meet the preferred standards that you have for housing. in floor plans, when we're talking about matching the social arrangement with the needs of a potential future occupant, this might be a little bit more qualitative. It might be a little bit more subjective in your review. But this is where you, as the project manager, and you may choose at this stage to engage with groups within your community who may be able to speak with lived experience about the needs of those occupants, or with your community's leadership about what those needs are. But it's about being able to analyze how the arrangement of a home and how the features of a living environment meet the specific needs of that future occupant. And part of that is going to be ensuring that you properly understand those and know what you're looking for. So I'm going to take you through some examples of that now. So let's look at this example here where the value that a group of potential future occupants might have is safety. And so here we're playing out safety as being about egress, as about being able to leave a building, exit the home through your bedrooms with quickly and easily. And so you can see how this design might meet that with the arrows that are shown on screen, where each bedroom has a rapid access to one of the two doors. Now, this is a specific feature to a specific home, and that may not be required in every situation. But if you understand when designing for larger families, and this house is designed imagining quite a large family, it's a large house, that there's a concern in families of being able to get out safely in the event of a fire because of potentially experiences with fire in communities in the past, that you want to make sure that this design accounts for that and is specific to that. And so you can imagine how bedrooms in this design might be placed in a different way that would not allow for this ease of access. Or you might have one of the exit doors in a different location. So for example, an earlier iteration of this design may have put an exit door closer to the kitchen as I'm showing it now, allowing for a kind of back patio off the kitchen. That's not uncommon. But by moving the door to its final location, what you allow for is this ease of egress from all the bedrooms. So let's move to a second example. In this example that you see on screen, using the same housing design, the value is in ensuring that there are 4 bedrooms of different sizes, 2 large bedrooms and 2 small bedrooms. Often, we'll see housing design that has 1 larger bedroom, the primary bedroom, and 3 quite small bedrooms. But in this example, what was explained is that the way that families, large families often live in large homes like this can be intergenerational or multifamily, and that actually the arrangement that is preferred is to have a kind of 2 and 2. And so we move away from this 1 and 3 configuration, 1 primary, 3 smaller, towards 2 larger and 2 smaller. Now again, this may not be the value that exists in your project or in your community, but it's about matching design and design features to those values. And you can see how in this case, this is a kind of unique feature, a specific feature that was requested in the design, and how it plays out on screen. I want to offer a few final notes now that we've gone through how to review an architectural package, both for the technical features and the social features. And think back just a couple of modules ago to a discussion about risk. The notes we're going to offer here are about reducing your risk, yours as the project manager, but more importantly, yours as the client and the First Nation. And moving some of that risk, and by risk here I mean the responsibility and liability within design, away from you and towards the architect or the professional providing the designs. And the way to do this is by ensuring that your drawings are stamped. And we show an example of a stamp on the corner of the slide here. The stamp and what that means is that a professional is signing off and assuming liability for what's contained within those drawings. Though, an important note here is that you do have to make sure that what's built is built to the exact specification of the stamped drawings, or you aren't actually reducing that risk and liability. This means if you're working from and building to a stamped drawing, that any of the problems of health or safety or errors in design, by which we mean not meeting the required code, is the responsibility who has stamped that drawing, and they're then accountable for those drawings. And so you want to make sure when you're choosing a design that it is stamped, to make sure that that responsibility and liability isn't yours or isn't the First Nations, but instead falls on the professional who created the drawing. That's all for design, and I hope we've left you with some guidance and some tools on how to select the design that best meets the objectives of your project. And as always, there's references and resources on screen here if you'd like to learn more about what we talked about in this module. Thanks.